Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. We're always talking about how much we love to unpack really complex topics, and today we've got one that's, well, it's definitely going to spark some conversation.
Oh, yeah, this one's a doozy.
We're diving into this speech transcript about modern masculinity, and it's not exactly a balanced debate here.
No, not at all. It's really one man's very strong take on what it means to be a man, and some of it is pretty controversial, to be honest.
So definitely, and we want to be upfront about that right from the start.
Yeah.
Our goal isn't to say, hey, everyone, this is the right way to think about masculinity.
Right, it's more like an intellectual exercise. Let's take this perspective and really dissect it, see what's in there.
Yeah, what resonates, what maybe makes us raise an eyebrow and where we might completely disagree.
Exactly, because even if we don't agree with everything this guy's saying, there's still value in understanding his point of view, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. What's the core argument here? What's this guy's fundamental belief about manhood?
Well, he starts off pretty strong. He says, men are born with no inherent value. Like, you don't just get to be valuable just because you exist.
Wow. Okay. So where does the value come from then, according to this guy?
He's all about what you do, not who you are. So it's about utility, strength, stoicism, those classic, almost like superhero qualities.
He actually uses that phrase, become a superhero,
Yeah.
which I thought was really interesting. What kind of superhero do you think he has in mind?
That's a good question. I think it's tied to those traditional roles, men as providers and protectors, always stepping up to face challenges, never showing weakness.
I see. So like that classic image of the strong, silent type.
Exactly, and he really emphasizes that struggle is a necessary part of becoming a man. He actually says, and I'm quoting here, the world is very, very difficult. It's hard to be a man. You're going to feel bad sometimes. You just suck it up and perform anyway.
There's a lot to unpack in that statement, but that that idea of just pushing down your emotions, not letting them get in the way, really jumps out at me. He even uses a Titanic analogy at one point, contrasting feeling with duty. It's interesting.
Yeah, he seems to be advocating for a certain kind of stoicism, but it makes you wonder, is it healthy stoicism or is it getting into harmful repression territory?
Right, because there's a difference between, learning to manage your emotions and just completely shutting them down.
Exactly. And that's where this perspective starts to get a little tricky. Because on the one hand, discipline and resilience, those are good qualities, but he takes it pretty far.
Yeah. Well, he flat out says, don't act how you feel, which is a pretty provocative statement.
Oh, yeah. And that's where things start to clash with a lot of modern thinking about mental health.
Yeah.
You can't just ignore your feelings forever.
Right. It seems like he's saying instead of processing those emotions, men are expected to kind of bottle them up and turn them into fuel for something else.
That's a great way to put it. And this is where he introduces this really vivid image, the bucket of war analogy.
Ooh, yeah. That one definitely caught my attention.
Yeah.
What's the meaning behind that?
So imagine a bucket and it's overflowing with all the intensity and chaos of war. That's the kind of emotional energy he's talking about. And instead of letting it spill over uncontrollably, you have to find productive outlets, holes to pour it into.
So like achievement work, becoming this stoic superhero figure, those become the ways to channel all that intense emotion.
Exactly. He argues that problems and challenges are actually the fuel that helps men develop, so the tougher things get, the more you have to draw on to become stronger. He even says, shielding men from problems actually makes them worse at being men.
Wow. So it's almost like he thinks you need to go through tough times to become a real man.
Yeah, that's the vibe I'm getting. And it kind of makes you wonder how healthy that is. Does it create this pressure to seek out hardship or to downplay your struggles?
That's a good point. And it seems like it all ties back to this idea of emotional control. Like it's not just about being tough, it's about never letting your emotions show.
Exactly. He talks about, men throughout history having to do things they didn't want to do all out of duty and honor. He even says, being a man is about not feeling things. It's about acting the way you're supposed to act, irregardless of how you feel.
Okay, wow. That is a bold statement. It's like he's saying feelings are irrelevant, which is so different from how we often talk about emotions today.
Right. All that stuff about expressing yourself, being vulnerable, seeking support when you need it. This guy's coming from a completely different place.
It really makes you wonder what happens when you constantly suppress your emotions. Like, where does all that energy go?
Well, he seems to think it should be channeled into action. Men being men of action, getting things done in the world. He used the example of the men who built skyscrapers. Like, they were probably terrified, but they did it anyway.
So it's like their fear or whatever other emotions they were feeling got transformed into this incredible feat of engineering.
Exactly. And it highlights how much he values external achievement as the measure of a man's worth. It's not about your inner life, your feelings. It's about what you can produce, what you can conquer.
So it's almost like this feedback loop. You face challenges, you suppress your emotions, you channel that energy into achievement, and then that achievement validates your manhood.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, but it also makes you wonder what happens if you don't achieve or if you struggle to meet these expectations, because not everyone's going to build a skyscraper.
That's such an important point, and it's something he doesn't really address. It's a very sink or swim mentality.
Totally. And I think that's where a lot of people would start to push back against this perspective. It feels very limiting, very black and white, not to mention the potential harm of bottling up your emotions indefinitely.
Yeah, you're right. There might be some kernels of wisdom in there about, resilience and taking responsibility, but it's important to recognize the downsides of this all or nothing approach.
Absolutely. It doesn't leave much room for vulnerability, empathy, or even just the normal range of human emotions.
There's definitely a lot to unpack here,
Yeah.
but I think it's valuable to grapple with these kinds of perspectives, even if they make us uncomfortable.
I agree. It forces us to examine our own ideas about masculinity and what it means to be a good man in a world that often has very rigid expectations.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into this particular viewpoint, we want to turn the conversation over to you.
Hmm.
What stands out to you? What resonated? What challenged your thinking? And what parts did you maybe disagree with?
Because those are the moments where you can really, start to refine your own understanding of the world and how you fit into it.
Totally. And it brings us to a final thought for you to consider as you process all of this. This speaker presents a very specific vision of masculinity, one that's rooted in strength, stoicism, achievement. But how much of that perspective do you think is shaped by his personal experiences, his own journey through life?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, we each view the world through the lens of our own unique experiences, right? Our upbringing, the culture we come from.
Right. So what he's saying might resonate with some people, but it might not with others, and that's okay.
Exactly. It's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all, kind of guidebook on how to be a man.
And there really isn't one right answer anyway, is there?
Nope. There's no single answer, no one-size-fits-all approach to figuring out what it means to be a good man. It's a personal journey. It really is, navigating expectations and defining your own values.
Yeah, and as you're on that journey, I think it's so important to be critical of the messages you encounter, right? Whether they come from a speech like this one, or a book, or even your own internal
Oh,
monologue.
absolutely. Question the assumptions, consider the source, and always be open to exploring different perspective.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the complexities of masculinity. We hope it's given you some food for thought, maybe sparked a few healthy debates along the way.
Always good to have those debates.
It is. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep evolving.